Hi, I'm Emily Smejkal. Today I'll be discussing the feasibility of repurposing Alberta's oil and gas wells for geothermal energy use. Alberta has over 450,000 wells that have been drilled since the beginning of the 20th century. 333,000 of these wells have yet to be reclamation certified and are either operating, orphaned, suspended, or abandoned. The current estimated liability associated with these wells is $100 billion. If even some of these wells can be repurposed and reused for geothermal energy, it is worth investigating. In order to evaluate the potential of an oil and gas well for geothermal, it is important to understand the key differences between the two types of wells. The wellbore diameter. Geothermal wells typically have diameters more than 3 times that of an oil and gas well. The flow rates. Geothermal wells, if they need to produce power, they have to flow up to 300 liters per second, which works out to be over 163,000 barrels per day. Now, heat can be generated from much lower flow rates. And currently in Alberta, less than 1% of Alberta's active wells produce over 126 barrels per day. The final key difference between geothermal and hydrocarbon wells is that the depth and temperature. So your typical oil and gas well is drilled to less than 2 kilometers, whereas a geothermal well needs to be drilled to 3 to 4 kilometers to get the temperature that's required. Now, these differences mean that only a select number of existing oil and gas wells or pools of wells will be suitable for repurposing to geothermal energy. The first step in evaluating Alberta's existing wells is for geothermal potential is a multidisciplinary approach using publicly available downhole production data. It will be necessary to remove wells with known downhole problems, such as corrosion, casing, and surface vent flows. Initially, orphan wells should be included, but very few will likely meet the requirements for repurposing. After initial screening for downhole problems, candidates will then be evaluated for fluid production and downhole temperature. To be viable for geothermal heat generation, candidates must produce fluids at high flow rates greater than 10 liters per second and have temperatures greater than 40 degrees Celsius. A potential list of screening criteria is shown in Table 1. Once a list of candidate wells have been identified based on their geothermal energy potential, the next step would be to evaluate them from a geospatial perspective. Candidates could be targeted for a variety of potential uses, such as co-production, wellbore reentry, and direct heat production, as shown in Figure 3. Candidate oil and gas wells must be near communities or industrial centers to ensure that there is a market for the geothermal energy that's being generated. Rural, remote, and Indigenous communities may benefit most from geothermal energy use with projects such as greenhouses, drying facilities, aquaculture, and community heating. Now, the idea for repurposing existing oil and gas wells for geothermal energy is not new. In fact, there are currently projects worldwide using this idea. Transitional Energy and Grant Canyon Oil and Gas in Nevada recently got funding from the DOE in 2022. They are working on a repurposing project where the operator maintains the well liability of existing oil wells, and the pool is repurposed for co-production. Then, as oil cut drops off, the plan is to transition to renewable geothermal power. Closer to home, Futerra Power has recently announced, which is a division of Razor Energy, has recently announced their natural gas and geothermal co-production power plant, which I believe is now under construction. They're expecting to generate 21 megawatts of electricity from the Swan Hills. 30% of this power is expected to come from geothermal. Now, while it will be possible to repurpose some wells, it will require a detailed multidisciplinary look to find the viable candidates. Thankfully, much of the data required for this analysis is publicly available in Alberta. Numerous pools in Alberta are on the fringe of power production potential and have high direct use potential. Wells that cannot be repurposed still provide valuable subsurface and production information, as well as the existing surface infrastructure. Synergies between these geothermal energy sources and industrial operations could be a win-win for geothermal developers and oil and gas operators, especially where grid electrification is unavailable. Overall, there's a huge potential in Alberta to utilize what we've already developed. And while it will be possible to convert some of the oil and gas wells here to geothermal energy, it is not going to be a simple task and is going to require a very detailed analysis. Thank you very much.